when you get up to the percent, and you can come here, and then this is the green one is to change the slides. No, you don't have slides. No, you don't have slides. Good. No problem at all.
However you like to do that.
I find lovely to meet you. Likewise.
Yes, so no need to worry about this. So you can come up here.
Very well. Very well. Next week.
Okay, yes.
Yes, you know, it's at the moment when the minister starts to get to look, he's there. Yes.
When was the date?
28th. September, then on the 2nd we have the cup, and then we.
Leaving my card. How long were you in Korea for?
Until Thursday.
Okay, a couple of days.
Oh, wait.
Events. Yes, we've had lots of visitors here. Sharma twice in the last year or so.
Good, let me just see.
Everybody else's cards, you can sign them.
Yes. So,
Interesting program.
yeah, very interesting. Thank you. It's normal, that's sort of the defensiveness about ambition versus embracing of it.
Yes.
That artist is everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Surprisingly, private sector has come around more rapidly in the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, I had the same kind of issues. Private sector was pushing back very hard, therefore the Ministry of Industry was pushing hard, therefore the Ministry of Finance only foreign affairs and environment were wanting to have more ambition. Now, Hyundai and others are most ahead of the government. So that is an important change.
We have now KB. She had in relation to 0 to big banking groups. So I think very significant.
Yes, Jan was the first. Yes, that's interesting. But indeed, in the government, I mean, my former deputy here is now the deputy minister.
Yes.
Yes,
She's great.
she's great.
Yeah.
But she's been a rock and a hard place.
Yes, yes, I got that impression.
So I had, the Simon Smith here banging away on every dinner we had on recently for the Danish Time Ambassador last Monday. And then the co-chair of the Net Zero Commission was there, lady academic. She was really so defensive, so explaining why everything is so this very great.
Yeah.
Well, good event.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Before we got start, that's the working paper that this organization came up with.
Oh.
You should take a look at it before that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's a really everyone here or still waiting? Everyone's here. Let's go. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to GGGI's offices here in Seoul, in South Korea, to an event on the role of youth in climate action, which is organized jointly between the Global Green Growth Institute, the UK, and the Italian embassies here in Korea. My name is Ingvild Solvang, and I work for the Global Green Growth Institute as the head of climate action and inclusive development. And it's my great honor to moderate this roundtable discussion today. And let me just start by setting the scene just a little bit before we get started. Now, I have a feeling that something has changed the last few years. Climate is on the agenda. And I think I especially became aware of that around 2019, when climate change, I believe,
년만 해도 기후변화가 많은 사람들의 위험
humanity. We saw millions on the street for climate action in 2019. And I think the favorite part, or at least my favorite part of this wave that swept across the world at the time, was the really, really pivotal role of youth in driving that. We could see powerful girls and boys, young women and young men speaking up and demanding ambitious climate action. And of course, Swedish Greta Thunberg became a symbol of this awakening, if we want to call it that. And I think the evidence of what a young person can achieve. And I think many of us, we watched Greta's speech at the UN Climate Summit in 2019, and we saw how fearlessly she spoke through to power in front of millions of people, really, really inspiring. And we knew that we were watching something very special. And I wanted it to become that watershed moment that I truly believe that it actually was. But then COVID hit. The climate process was interrupted. COP26 was postponed, and media consumed by COVID news. However, interrupted by an increasing number of devastating extreme weather events and fires around the world. So at GGGI, we shifted very quickly to talk about the need to align COVID recovery with climate action and to see COVID emergency and COVID response also as an opportunity to drive ambition climate action. And I believe the conversation has continued with increasing urgency. The UK COP26 presidency, in partnership with Italy, is working really hard to build the momentum and prepare to overcome the sticky points of the climate negotiations. We are also eagerly awaiting the upcoming Youth for Climate Driving Ambition event in Milan, Italy, in just a couple of weeks, which we will hear more about today. And which is a real opportunity for youth engagement in the COP, leading up to COP26. And the timing really couldn't be better. It's been just a bit more than a month since the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, released its 6th assessment report. Code Red for Humanity, it was called, an alarm bell. And we have never been more certain than we are right now because of this report that climate action is caused by human activity and that the impacts can become disastrous without absolute resolute action. So if the heat wasn't on the COP26 before, it certainly is now. And we need to see successful COP26. We need to see the rule book completed and the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. And I think as a mother of a 9 and 11-year-old, I couldn't be more proud and happy to see my own children learning and educating themselves about climate and climate action, much with the help of us as parents, but also passionate teachers and other adults, showing that intergenerational handover is not just possible, but necessary to build a lasting movement and momentum to ensure the long-term commitment and will to drive the necessary change. And we need the youthful impatience to remind us of ambition, urgency, and that it is in fact about the most important thing of all, which is our future. The future belongs to the young, and the young generation is here in this room also today to claim a prominent seat at the table. So what we will do today is we will have 5 presenters. Before we get started with that, this machinery in front of you is translations. Channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. So we will have the opportunity to speak in both languages today. We welcome anyone who wants to speak English or Korean. For those of you joining us online, welcome to you as well. There is also a double channel for languages on Zoom. If you have any problems with that, please write your questions in the chat box for technical assistance by our team here in the room. And a bit about the process. We will start with 5 speakers representing different institutions and also different generations. The first one today will be Dr. Frank Reisbarman from GGGI, the Director General, who will give a few welcoming remarks. We will then hear from Mr. Nigel Topping, who is from the UK and the COP26 Climate Action Champion, who will be speaking about the expectations for youth at the COP26. We also have Mr. Roberto Rizzo, the Deputy Head of Mission from the Embassy of Italy, who will share with us the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition event, which will be held in Milan in just a couple of weeks. Before we hand it over to Miss Gyuri Lee, who is Korea's Youth for Climate participant at this event in Milan. I believe she is joining us online from Helsinki, Finland. And last but not least, Mr. Min Kim from Big Wave will be speaking about youth political participation from the organization Big Wave. The presentations will be followed by a roundtable discussion where we will also invite 7 other representatives from the Green Environment Youth Korea and Big Wave. And these are all very already seasoned and experienced climate activists, very active in policy and politics here in Korea, for example, from the Korean Carbon Neutrality Committee, but we will get to that in a minute. And hopefully we will also have time for some Q&A from the audience at the very end, if time allows. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Frank Reisbarman, Director General of GGGI.
From over there, I think here is good. Maybe indeed slightly easier to understand without mask when we speak. I think I can keep it really brief because I think our moderator, Ingvild, already did a great job in welcoming everybody. Nevertheless, welcome to GGGI, particularly Mr. Nigel Topping, high-level champion for COP26, and the Deputy Head of Mission from the Italian mission, Roberto Rizzo, but also all other participants here in the room and online for what hopefully is a good discussion on a very important topic. I'm not youth, I'm old. I've been in this climate debate for over 40 years. And most of the time it was climate scientists talking to climate scientists with very little feedback from the population at large or from young people. And I have to say, we are also, in the beginning when I started this as a young person to talk about climate change, we talked about something that was far away, 100 years from now, something that might affect our grandchildren. And it has come incredibly close. It has come so close that now we're talking about a decade which might be the last chance for humanity to avoid really serious consequences for future generations. I recently had a chance to watch a wonderful documentary on Netflix from Sir David Attenborough and my good friend Johan Rockström, Breaking Boundaries, which is an excellent way of showing to people without a climate science background what the urgency is in many areas of this deep sustainability crisis to take action now. So yes, I think couldn't be more convinced that this is an urgent issue for everybody, for politicians at the top of the food chain, all the way to the public at large. And finding a better way to have young voices actively engage in that discussion, I think, is a critical element. So I would like to just add my word of welcome to that already given by Ingvild, and hope that we'll have a wonderful opportunity to engage today. Back to you, Ingvild.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Mr. Nigel Topping, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Ingvild. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, GGI, for the welcome and hosting. And is it good afternoon for everybody, or do we have some people from? I'm so used to saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we're doing so many global things. But it's a real pleasure to be here. This is actually my first visit to Korea. So I just thought I'd say a couple of things about my role, and then just some reflections on the role of youth. And what I guess one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insist on blurring the young and old distinction. You're not old. I'm not old. It's all relative, right? And I think one thing I really want to insist on is actually we are one generation. If you look at the context of climate change, it's happening over decades and centuries, and it will last for decades and centuries. And we are the generation that's alive today with the chance and the responsibility to fix it. So if it's one message I'll have to you, it's let's think of this as a partnership between people who are a little bit older and a little bit younger, but really are one generation. And above all, let's not. So I actually would say this is not a handover. I mean, you're not going to stop me working on climate change until I'm very, very old. So I'm not going to hand over. I'm going to work. I'm going to take your hand. I'm going to work with you for as long as I can, because I believe it's a responsibility and it's a passion and it's something that I've committed the rest of my life to. So, I'm sorry, translators. I'll try and slow down. I sometimes get a bit excited. So first of all, just to explain my role, high level. My full title is the High Level Climate Action Champion, which is a long title. And actually, the role has its origins in a conversation with the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in a dark room in Poland in COP19 in 2013, when he called a group of us leaders from the business and the city community together, and the NGOs working with them, and said, we need to start finding a way to bring the voices of others into this process, other people with powerful ability to mobilize resources and to drive change. So like, if you think of the mayor of New York City, or the governor of California, or the CEO of Samsung, right? These are people who have real power to change. And without them, there's no way that we can tackle the climate crisis. Governments on their own can't do it. We have to do this all together. So that eventually led to the creation of the role of the high-level champion in Paris as part of the Paris Agreement, when the countries decided that, as well as the NDC process and everything that you all know so much about, that national governments are bound to by ratifying the Paris Agreement. This, if you like, a parallel track of working with what the UN system calls non-state actors was created. And it's the job of the champions to work with those non-state actors to drive ambition and action to support national governments implementing the Paris Agreement. So I work with Gonzalo Munoz, who's the Chilean high-level champion, and next year I will work with an African high-level champion from whichever country takes on the presidency of COP27. We run a big campaign we call the Race to Zero, in which we're trying to get every business, every investor, every bank, every city, every region to commit to getting to zero by 2050 at the latest. We prefer 2040 or 2035. Anything less than 2050 is better because we're fighting for every year and every fraction of a degree. And by doing that, we know that we drive what we call the ambition loop, that when we see more ambition from those actors, it makes it easier for national governments to be bold. So when KB and Shihan Bank commit to getting to net zero, it makes it easier for businesses and the government in Korea to commit to making the changes that they need to make as well. It makes it less risky for everybody. We also have a campaign called the Race to Resilience, and we're working particularly with private finance in partnership with Mark Carney, who many of you will know was the governor of the Bank of England, to create the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, which so far has over $90 trillion of assets, that's pension funds and banks, committed to getting to net zero and importantly to doing the hard work in the next 10 years. So that's our job. I could talk about that a lot more, but I wanted to say a little bit about the role of youth leadership. And I always think about this. I remember the story of the first landing on the moon in 1969. And you may remember the story that President John Kennedy of America committed in 1961 that they would land on the moon by the end of the decade. Now, when the Eagle, that's the lunar module, was descending to the surface of the moon, remember this was the very early days of computers, the first transistors, right? So very less computing power on that space module than in my watch, way less than in my phone. And when they were landing, they were about 1 minute from touchdown. The computer failed. So you can imagine the computer is controlling the machine. You're the first humans ever to be in space landing on the moon, and the lights go out on the computer. They still had communications back to base in Houston. And 2 people had to make a decision within 5 seconds of whether to abort the landing and go back out or whether to continue. And those 2 people were young engineers who were in their early 20s, who had been teenagers when Kennedy said, we're going to land on the moon by the end of the decade. So the first thing I always want us to remember is never to underestimate a teenager who's committed to a certain path, who might be the person who we're relying on to make a crucial decision. Now, the thing I like to emphasize is the partnership, because those 2 young engineers were working for an old engineer like me or Frank. So it was a partnership between experience and quick thinking and intelligence and commitment. But that journey from being a teenager, maybe being an activist, to being a leader can happen very, very quickly, especially in the context of what we're saying. So, first thing to say is young people are, as Ingvild says, already doing a lot and making a difference. And sometimes it's very hard to know that you're making a difference. But young people have changed the agenda. They've turned up the pressure, and they've changed the politics in the last few years. And that affects governments, national and cities, and it affects businesses, because business leaders are looking at that momentum and saying these are our future customers and our future employees. There's that if we want, and they know that if they want to attract the best young engineers, they need to have really embedded tackling climate change in their businesses. We've seen great work like the mock COP last year with I think 330 delegates from 140 countries engaging in the content. We've included young people in the Race to Zero dialogues. We've taken young professionals from like the food industry and the transport industry and had them challenging senior executives from major businesses. So, young professionals who really know what they're talking about, whether it's about hydrogen or protein and some of the changes. We call those youth setting the agenda, and they worked really well. And of course, there was the Y20 summit earlier this year, and the youth COP, which is coming up 2 weeks, right? Very soon. And I would just say a couple of thoughts about what's most effective from my perspective is one, just to keep demanding more ambition, but also to be specific in your asks. And I know I've just, Ingrid just shared the working paper you have on COP26. And I think getting into the language of the negotiators is really important. I would encourage you to be even more specific. When I was running We Mean Business at COP21, we actually wrote and published the text, the actual language that we wanted to be adopted. And that's a very powerful way. You give that to a negotiator and say, this is the language we want. Because remember, they're all very busy and they can see that. So be specific. And I think finally seek those opportunities to work intergenerationally. As I say, I'd like to think that we are one generation with some a bit older and some a bit younger, but really what we're doing is fighting for the future for the generations that are yet to come. Your presence in and around COP26 will be very important. The last thing I'd say is don't fall into the trap of thinking that the only thing happening in Glasgow is the negotiations. So when I just very quickly skimmed through this, so it's a working paper on COP26, but I don't see anything here about what's happening in the real economy or with non-state actors. So yes, the 100 billion is crucial. It must be delivered. Yes, the rule book is crucial. It must be completed, but there's a lot more happening in Glasgow in terms of mobilizing the private sector, mobilizing business leadership, mobilizing city and regional leadership. And young people have a role in all of that change as well. So I think, and going forward, COPs will be more and more about that real economy momentum because there's less and less to negotiate and it has to be all about implementation. And you driving that implementation, calling for specifics, whether it's more renewable energy or a faster phase out of combustion engine sales, can be very, very influential in driving that ambition loop so that together, as one generation with some slightly older and some slightly younger, we deliver the 50% reduction in emissions, which are crucial to keep 1.5 alive this decade. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw somebody wanted to give an applause, and that's allowed. Very well said. Thank you very much, Nigel. So I'll hand it over now to Italy and to Mr. Roberto. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just, excuse me for a second. I'm going to just grab the remote to screen my presentation. So thank you very much, Director General, Ms. Oldham, Ms. Topping. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about pre-COP, to talk about the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition event that is going to happen at the end of this month in September. And it's one of the most important events that Italy has co-organized together with the UK for the COP26 is doing this year, has prepared this year. The Youth COP and the pre-COP events are preparatory meetings, basically, for the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is shortened as UNFCCC. The pre-COP event, in particular, is dedicated to the negotiations among the states parties on the final document, conclusions, that of the actual COP26, which will take place a month later at the beginning of November. For what concerns the event Youth for Climate Driving Ambition, Italy's attentions to the young generation's concerns derives from young Italians' active will to contribute to the environment protection. It seems that according to the polls that we have done in our country, 82% of the young Italians declare to be willing to change habits to protect the environment. That's why we want, the Italian government want the young generations to be part of the COP process for three important reasons, basically. The recognition of the disproportional and increasing impact of climate change on new generations, the need to make the youngsters an active part to the debate on climate change, and the will to ensure a just and inclusive economic transition. Let's see if it works. Yes. Those are basically the reasons why we need youth to intervene and to be part of this process. And I agree with Nigel. Yes, we are not old. We want to be part of this process. We want to keep being part of this process. But of course, there is an important and active role that the younger generation need to play and to be involved in. What is going to happen at the Youth for Climate event, the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition in Milan? The UNFCCC accredited organization have been involved together with many local NGOs and associations, also here in Korea, of youth, to send to Milan some representatives who will share their experiences, ideas, and concerns before the pre-COP26. And we're very happy that we have together with us this evening, Ms. Gyuri Lee, and Ms. Gyuri Lee today as a representative of Korea, who has been selected together with Mr. Tae Hwan Kim, and they will both be in Milan to represent Korea to this event during the Youth for Climate event. The youth event will be dealing with 4 major themes, namely youth driving ambition, sustainable recovery, non-state actors engagement, and a climate-conscious society. Each theme will also feature a number of subtopics to better detail the discussion in line with the most pressing issues and priorities in the international climate agenda. The event will be directed by the Italian Ministry of Ecological Transition, which will oversee plenary sessions and the adoption process of the final outcome document. But we will try to have as much as possible the involvement of the youth that are being part of this event. To guide the thematic work, a working group will be set up for each of the 4 teams. So there's going to be 4 thematic working groups to be managed by 2 co-chairs, 1 youth representative and 1 senior profile from international organization. Specific discussion at the subtopic level to be conducted in parallel within each team will be moderated by 2 co-facilitators to be appointed among the participants. So the participants will be really the protagonists of this event. And the process will be also supported by selected bridge builders to facilitate fluency in the conversation at both thematic and topic levels, and also by selected youth advisor who will facilitate participants' engagement. There's going to be really a lot of participation of young people in Milan. What are the outcome of the Youth for Climate event? The Youth for Climate event basically will get to a final document containing all the proposal and recommendations emerging from the event, from the young people that will participate to the event. It will likely consist of specific proposal for each theme to be addressed to a different international process in line with their subject matter. But going back to what I was saying about the fact that I do not consider myself old and I want to keep working on the field. As Nigel was saying, as Director General was saying, we want to be part of this process, but we need you. We need young people. We need you to be active, to be more active than what we have done maybe in the past. The process that we're going to face, decarbonization, is carbon neutrality 2050, is a long process, is an expensive process, is a complicated process. It's not an easy step that we have to face. We need you to raise your voices together with us and help us and help politicians to change the way we are thinking, the way we used to think in the last hundreds of years, if you want. We need to change and to create new policies towards carbon neutrality 2050. This change, by the way, it's not just necessary because it's good for the environment, it's good for our earth, it's good for our future, it's good for our children. It brings together a lot of opportunities for universities, for scientists, a lot of improvements in our technologies. It brings opportunities also for our business. It's a business opportunity. It's an employment opportunity for us all. So it's also good to invest in this change that is, in a way or in another, necessary for our planet. To conclude, and not to talk too much about what we have done in the past and what we need to do, which is up basically to the younger generation, I just want to underline some facts that has been done by Italy in the last years. Italy is among the most committed countries at the international level for what concerns climate action, and we intend to play a pioneering role in combating climate change. Within the EU, we have reached well in advance, the climate reduction targets for 2020, and we are investing a lot in what are going to be our targets for 2030. Among all of these targets, among all of these commitments, I would like to underline one topic that is extremely important also for Korea, and we keep talking about it also in our meetings with Korean authorities at a political and at more scientific and technical level. The Italian national plan establishes that we need to shut down all our coal power plants within 2025. We don't have many, actually, we have 8, but the process is expensive, the process is complicated. It needs considerable investments, especially because some of these coal power plants are in islands of the country, which are not completely connected or not at all connected to the gas national network or to the electric national network, which means that shutting down the coal power plants is a process that requires a lot of investments, not just from the state, but also from the private sector. One of the biggest Italian company, Enel, is managing coal power plants in the country, and they are investing a lot in connecting these islands to the gas network, to the gas national network, and to the electric national network. This is the only way they can to shut down before they need to do it before shutting down these coal power plants. But it's a necessary step. Coal power plants are the biggest polluters in our country and in many other countries, and it's a necessary step that we need to do to finally be on the right way to get to the net zero 2050. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a discussion with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roberto, for giving us insight into the Youth COP, which is a good example, I think, of the attempt to actively facilitate the voices of the young into the climate process. So I think it's a good time now to see whether we can establish contact with Ms. Gyuri Lee online. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello,
Great.
everyone.
So she will be representing Korea in Milan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I have PPT slides, so yes, thank you. So, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak here today. And also, it is an honor to be here today. My name is Gyuri Lee, and I am representing Republic of Korea in this year's Youth for Climate event. In this event, there are approximately 400 youth climate leaders, and we will be having an opportunity to put forward ideas and concrete proposals on some of the most pressing issues on the climate agenda together. So, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so to introduce myself briefly, I'm from Korea, and I graduated with my degree in International Development and International Environmental Studies. So during and after the studies, I have worked as an intern in the international organizations such as the Global Green Growth Institute and also the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, where they both deal with environmental issues apparently. After graduation, I was working as a climate change and renewable energy consultant in Korea for 1 year. And now I am studying abroad for a master's degree in environmental studies. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I would like to share motivations I had when I was applying for Youth for Climate events. Above all, because we are the one who have to tackle this issue. As we youth are the ones who are going to be the main actor in this issue in the near future. So I wanted to actively engage in already at this young age. And also we have experienced the negative impact of climate change in our youth already. So I wanted to be the part of this international event where I can meet people around my age who also have same experiences and ideas and share our concerns on this and actions to be taken for this climate change issue. And another motivation I had is that I believe that we can have more sustainable and greener future. Like in recent years, seeing that people's awareness on climate change issue growing day by day, I strongly believe that we can have the future where development and growth can go with environmental sustainability. By participating in the Youth for Climate, I want to discuss this positive future we can bring in real life and what we should do for it with other youth delegates from all around the world. Next slide, please. So Mr. Roberto Rizzo had already emphasized about this a bit, but we have these 4 main themes, and then I'm going to be participating in working group 2, sustainable recovery. These themes were actually informed after we had our invitations to participate in Youth for Climate. So we had to write another application for it, which we will be, where will we assign to among these 4. And then on Tuesday this week, actually, tomorrow, we are having working groups virtual meeting for the first time. Since we started to prepare for our participation with Youth for Climate, there have been various activities where we could meet other delegates already and discuss our action plans and share our opinions. I was very much inspired to hear many perspectives, opinions, and experiences of delegates, even if we have not met each other yet. And this helped a lot to already get to know a bit about each other before the event. And the next slide, please. So this slide, I would like to talk about expectations for Youth for Climate, not only my expectation, but also other youth delegates' expectation. Before this presentation, I have consulted some of the youth delegates in this Youth for Climate if they have any expectations for Youth for Climate. So I incorporated their responses to this presentation. So first of all, under the 4 main themes, we are not working individually, but we work together. We work together to make our proposals for ministers attending pre-COP26 and COP26. We all might have different backgrounds, experiences, and opinions. So in this Youth for Climate event, we can share these different backgrounds, and this will be added value on the fruitful discussions that we're gonna have in Milan. And actually, we were already having some discussions and also participating in each other's campaign through online, virtually. And also we had this opportunity to discuss many sustainability, climate change, and some how to initiate these campaigns on the UNDP platform called Spark Blue. And furthermore, as this event is held in international scale, we get to know about how other countries, corporations in other countries have been doing on their end to tackle climate crisis. And we build connections and bonds with each other throughout this event. So basically, we expect that this can be an international network for us to get to know how this climate agenda has raised, and we could also support each other on our work on climate change issue, even after this Youth for Climate event. And lastly, I think this is the most important part. It is also significant that this Youth for Climate can help us have louder, bigger voice. Nowadays, many big corporates are turning towards considering environmental sustainability in doing their businesses. And also governments are turning towards shutting down the coal power plants and also replacing them into more like sustainable options. However, I think we youth, as also a big portion of consumer group and also as citizen, should push them to be more ambitious and active when it comes to climate change issue by reminding their goals in determining carbon footprint. For this, as youth and also consumer citizen, I think louder voice is what we need to push them forward. And I believe this event is a perfect opportunity for letting our voice reach them. Next slide, please. So the Youth for Climate event is just around the corner. And I think it is very meaningful and timely to have this youth event, considering the recent IPCC's 6th assessment report, where it has mentioned the average temperature of Earth can increase by 1.5 degrees higher than the end of 19th century within 20 years. And natural disasters such as forest fires, flood, and like record-breaking high temperatures, I would like to emphasize that we really need to take action now. I sincerely hope that Youth for Climate event can be a platform where youth opinion and voices get more power, and also let us have impact, actual impact on current climate agenda and negotiations between governments. Thank you very much for your attention. See you soon in Milan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gyuri. Very inspiring. Congratulations on your participation in Milan. I'm sure that will be a great experience. I think we are hearing some really, I love the analogy of the moon landing and the old engineer and the young engineer. And I think we have some old and young working together now really to put this Youth Cup together and provide these types of opportunities. And as Gyuri was saying, voice and opinion to get power and influence by intergenerational collaboration. I'm seeing some themes here. I'm also delighted now to call on the last presenter, Mr. Min Kim from Big Wave, will be presenting on youth political participation. Thank you very much.
Okay. 네, 저는 한국어로 네, I can speak Korean. 네, 코리안으로 저는 오늘 프레젠테이션을 좀 이어가겠습니다. 네, 안녕하세요. 저는 빅웨이브에서 활동하고 있는 김민이라고 합니다. 우선 오늘 자리 네, 초대해 주셔서 정말 감사합니다. 지금 빅웨이브에서 활동하고 있지만 이제 2050 탄소중립위원회 민간위원으로도 참여하고 있습니다. 오늘 제가 이제 준비한 발표를 딱 제목만 봤을 때 저 처음에 딱 떠오르는 사람이 2명 있었습니다. 네, 미국 하원에서 그린 뉴딜 결의안 채택을 주도한 알렉산드리아 오카시오 코르테즈, 그리고 미래를 위한 금요일 Future for Fridays에서 글로벌 클라이밋 스트라이크를 이어가고 있는 그레타 툰베리였습니다. 하지만 저는 요 지금 주제에 대해서 좀 우리나라가 당면한 이슈와 관련해서 좀 이야기를 하고자 합니다. 그리고 청년 활동가의 시각에서 이것을 좀 재정의해 보고 이것이 이후에 토론과 좀 이어지길 바라는 마음에서 발표를 준비했습니다. 제가 처음에 생각했을 때 청년이라 유스라고 하는 것은 굉장히 다양한 정체성을 가지고 있다고 생각합니다. 특히 이해관계를 갖고 있지 않기 때문에 행동에 있어서 많은 선택지가 있다고 할 수 있는데요. 그렇기 때문에 내가 굳이 국회의원이 아니더라도 다양한 정치 참여가 가능하다고 생각합니다. 그래서 첫 번째는 시민으로서의 정치라고 할 수 있는데요. 대선 후보에게 직접 투표를 하거나 국회의원에게 직접 투표를 하는 그런 정치 참여가 있을 수 있겠고, 그리고 두 번째로는 이제 소위 말해 그린워싱이라고 하는 것에 대해서 우리는 과연 어떤 기업에게 투자를 하고 선택을 해야 되는가라는 정치 참여 활동도 있을 것 같습니다. 그리고 사회초년생, 어떤 주니어 학생으로서, 그리고 내가 현재 속한 집단에서 어떤 문화들을 확산을 할 것인지, 이런 것도 일종의 정치 참여라고 생각합니다. 그리고 마지막으로 나와 비슷한 고민들을 가지고 있고 문제의식을 갖고 있는 청년들과 이제 공동체, 커뮤니티에서 같이 호흡하면서 참여하는 것 또한 정치라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 저희가 생각하는 이제 청년이라고 하는 거는 이렇게 다양한 정체성을 가지고 있기 때문에 그러니까 아까도 계속 말씀해 주셨지만 굳이 나이로 청년을 정의할 수 없다고 생각합니다. 이 기후변화에 대한 문제의식을 바탕으로 스스로 질문을 던질 수 있고 그거에 대한 스스로 또한 답을 찾아갈 수 있는 사람이 저는 청년 유스라고 생각합니다. 그 청년들이 이런 것에 참여하기 위해서는 동기부여와 자기 효능감이 선순환을 가지는 게 굉장히 중요하다고 할 수 있겠습니다. 자발적으로 참여하고 이 문제에 대해서 또한 여기에 어떻게 보면 봉사를 하는 걸 수도 있겠죠. 그렇기 때문에 자기가 하는 활동에 대해서 스스로 만족감을 얻는 것이 참여에 있어서 굉장히 중요하고 그것들이 지속적으로 이어지게 하는 동기라고 생각합니다. 그렇기 때문에 이제 자기가 가지고 있는 관심사와 기후위기가 어떻게 연결이 되는지가 중요합니다. 경제, 문화, 사회, 어떤 예술, 그런 다양한 분야들과 어떻게 기후위기가 연결이 돼서 그 안에서 어떤 현상들이 나타나고 있는지 연결하는 것이 중요합니다. 그리고 두 번째는 주위에 있는 타인들과 상호작용을 하는 과정에서 같이 어떤 연대의식, 연대감을 얻는 것이 또한 중요합니다. 이를 통해서 우리 나이 또래 청년 세대에서 기후위기라는 주제가 중요한 사회적 아젠다가 될 수 있다고 생각합니다. 그리고 나이나 성별, 그리고 내가 살고 있는 지역, 그리고 내가 나온 학교, 여기에 구애받지 않는 것 또한 중요합니다. 그리고 그것들이 결국에는 누구나 참여할 수 있는 일종의 운동장을 만드는 행동과 이어진다고 생각합니다. 그래서 최근에 2050 탄소중립위원회에 자발적으로 모인 청년들이 그 2040 기후중립 시나리오라는 것을 제출했습니다. 문제의식의 배경은 청년들이 봤을 때 현재 정부에서 수립 중인 2050 시나리오가 문제점이 있다고 생각했기 때문입니다. 첫 번째는 기술 중심적으로 접근하다 보니 여기에 정말 중요하게 다뤄줘야 되는 사람이 보이지 않았습니다. 사람 중심적인 접근 방식이 좀 부족했다라고 생각했습니다. 그 두 번째는 앞서서도 말씀해 주셨지만 IPCC 6차 보고서에서 이야기한 그 기후위기의 사실, 그리고 IEA에서 발표한 2050 넷제로 로드맵에서 발표한 넷제로의 보고서에서도 알 수 있는 그런 사회 경제 시스템의 대전환, 이런 것들이 정말 위기로 다가오고 있는가에 대한 질문들이었습니다. 그리고 시나리오가 어떤 중간 목표 또는 감축 경로가 없는 이제 단일 시점의 미래상을 제시하고 있다는 것이 저희가 생각한 문제의식이었습니다. 그래서 청년 시나리오는 우리가 이런 메시지를 담아야 된다라고 하는 세 가지 포인트들을 잡아보았는데요. 실현 가능성을 떠나서 이것은 청년들이 나아가고자 하는 방향을 제시한다고 생각합니다. 첫 번째는 IPCC에서 권고한 이제 우리가 1.5도 목표를 지키기 위해 남은 탄소 배출 양이 얼마나 되는가, 즉 탄소 예산에 기반해서 우리에게 이게 전 지구적으로 1.5도 목표를 달성하는 것이 가장 큰 과제라고 생각했습니다. 그래서 탄소 예산을 고려해서 저희가 이 시나리오를 만들어 보았고요. 두 번째는 탄소 예산을 만들고 그 이후에 각각의 로드맵들, 각 부문별로 어떻게 해야 되는지, 경제는 어떻게 움직여야 되고, 우리가 타고 다니는 차는 어떻게 바뀌어야 되고, 교통 시스템은 어떻게 변화해야 되는지 등등입니다. 그래서 그런 탑다운 방식의 하향식 접근법을 채택했다는 의미가 있습니다. 그리고 이것들을 통해서 지금 이제 수립 중인 2030 온실가스 감축 목표 정책, 여기서의 목표치가 대폭 상향되는 것을 요구하고 있습니다. 지금 현재 우리나라는 2017년 대비해서 24.4%라는 목표치를 가지고 있습니다. 하지만 청년들은 24.4%가 아니라 최소 60% 이상은 될 것을 요구하고 있습니다. 그리고 그 과정에서 현재 가용 가능한 수단을 최대한 활용하는 것이 중요하다고 생각했습니다. 어떤 불확실한 미래 기술에 대한 의존을 최소화하고 지금 당장 할 수 있는 것들을 하는 것이 중요하다고 생각합니다. 어떻게 보면은 미래를 꿈꾸라고 이야기하기 위해서는 현재 우리가 얼마나 할 수 있는지, 얼마나 해야 되는지 그 의지와 노력을 보여주어야 된다고 생각합니다. 탄소중립위원회가 다양한 의견을 가진 사람들이 모여 있습니다. 저는 여기서 청년 활동가들이 자발적으로 작업한 시나리오를 이 위원회에 전달하는 것, 그것이 이제 다른 청년 위원들과 제가 갖고 있는 역할이라고 생각합니다. 네, 그래서 현재 청년뿐만 아니라 NGO 시민사회, 그리고 교육계, 종교계, 심지어 스타트업까지 43개 단체가 여기에 지지를 보내주었습니다. 그리고 300명의 개인 또한 여기에 힘을 실어주었고요. 그래서 현재 공식 제출되어서 논의가 진행 중이고, 이것들을 앞으로 어떻게 다양한 이해관계자들과 소통을 하는지가 앞으로의 과제라고 개인적으로 생각합니다. 마무리를 좀 드리고 싶은데요. 방금 말씀드린 청년 시나리오뿐만 아니라 청년들이 여기에 참여하는 것은 우리가 거기에서 요구하는 것은 저희 완벽한 해답이라고 생각하지 않습니다. 오히려 어떻게 보면은 기성 사회에 좀 질문을 던진다라고 저는 의의를 두고 싶습니다. 사실 지금 이 순간에도 우리나라에는 우리나라 어디선가 이제 6개의 석탄 발전소가 건설 중이고, 재생에너지는 아직도 지역에서 많은 갈등을 겪고 있습니다. 청년들이 이 탄소중립위원회를 포함해서 정부 주요 부처, 국회 이런 책임 있는 이해 당사자들에게 질문을 던지고 있습니다. 2050년에 넷제로를 이야기하지만 왜 2040년은 안 되는지, 그리고 석탄 발전소는 우리가 어떻게 줄일 수 있고, 정의로운 전환을 위해 우리에게 어떤 사회적인 협상 테이블이 필요한지, 네, 이런 것들을 물어보고 있습니다. 그래서 아까 말씀드린 청년의 정의와 똑같이 이런 것들을 요구만 하는 것이 아니라 앞으로 같이 해답을 찾아나가고자 합니다. 그리고 아마도 COP26에서 한국이 좀 불충분한 NDC 목표를 제시하는 것은 청년뿐만 아니라 여기 계신 분들이 속한 국가, 심지어 다른 여기에 참여하지 않은 다른 국가들도 원하지 않을 거라고 생각합니다. 10월 말까지 굉장히 시간이 얼마 남지 않았습니다. 우리가 당장 해야 될 일, 그리고 현재 할 수 있는 일이 무엇인지 이어지는 토론에서 같이 이야기 나눠봤으면 좋겠습니다. 감사합니다.
That was a round of applause, I think, for all our presenters. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation, Mr. Min Kim. Yes, that concludes the 5 presentations. So we will now go into a bit of a roundtable discussion. And we are going to invite more people than the presenters into this conversation. So we have a number of people from the Green Environment Youth Korea. When I call your name, do you want to just wave so we can see who is who? So Ji-ye Lee, hello, welcome. Son-yol Kim. Yeah, great. Yeon-ju Cho, good. And Ji-ae Im. Welcome to all of you. And then from Big Wave, we have Yoo Jong-hyun, good. And Dong-myun Kim. And last but not least, Kyung-im Choi. Welcome to all of you. We hope to hear your voices as well. Perhaps I want to hold on to the last points made in the presentation now by Mr. Min Kim. I think he gave a very good example of how the youth are driving for more ambition. We've been talking a lot in the earlier presentations about how there is intergenerational collaboration. And then I was very excited to hear in the last presentation that there is also a bit of the youth are impatient. They want to have more ambition and they want to see more action. Perhaps I'll ask some of the young professionals and youth in the room to speak a little bit about what you want to see happen in Korea, but also at COP26, your expectations and where you see the challenges are in having your voices heard and achieving what you would want to see. Feel free to grab the microphone. Should I perhaps, anyone ready? Yes, I see a hand. Please go ahead. You have to push the speak button when you want to speak, and then the red light.
Okay, if you don't mind, can I just speak in Korean?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 우선 아까 그 니겔 토픽님께서 말씀해 주시면서 그 글래스고 협상만이 유일한 게 아니고 실물 경제 협상도 되게 중요하다 말씀해 주신 점 너무 인상 깊었고, 그래서 저희가 좀 이번에 그 워킹 페이퍼도 작성을 하면서 좀 구체적으로 작성해 보고자 노력을 했던 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 부분 잘 봐주시고 한번 저희가 피드백 있으면 말씀해 주시면 좀 더 이제 구체적으로 작성할 수 있도록 노력해 보겠습니다. 이제 그리고 아까 그 이규리님께서 그 프리캅의 중요성 말씀을 해주셨었는데, 이제 코이도 마찬가지로 그렇고, 저는 사실 저희가 청년 활동가지만 되게 중요한 부분 중에 하나가 언론의 역할이라고 되게 생각이 들어요. 저희가 이제 활동을 함에 있어서 사실 많이 그 대중들에게 다가가는 수단은 아무래도 언론이 중대한 역할을 하는 것 같거든요. 근데 아시다시피 국내 사실 캅에 대한 언론 보도자를 찾기가 굉장히 힘듭니다. 왜냐하면 이제 정부에서 NDC에 대해서 소극적으로 나오면 나올수록 이런 거 홍보 요청을 안 할 테고, 언론에서는 이런 거에 선제적으로 관심을 갖기가 쉽지 않기 때문에 굉장히 홍보가 미비한 상황이라는 생각이 들어요. 또 그래서 이제 코이를 말씀해 주셨는데, 사실 제가 생각할 때 코이에 대한 언론은 거의 못 본 것 같아요. 그래서 이번에 코이를 저희가 나감에 있어서 이거를 한국에 어떻게 알릴 수 있을지, 그거에 대해서 저희 청년 활동가들이 많이 논의가 필요할 것 같고, 또 여기에 계신 전문가분들도 이거에 대해서 의견이 있으시면 좀 주시면 저희가 적극적으로 활용해 볼 수 있도록 노력하면 좋을 것 같습니다. 이제 그리고 하나 더 추가적으로 말씀드리고 싶은 거는, 얼마 전에 저희 푸른 하늘의 날 행사가 있었어요. 외교부에서도 뭐 주최를 했었고, 이제 각 환경부나 지자체에서도 많이 주최를 하고자 했는데, 사실 이런 거 이렇게 행사가 있을 때 사실 작년에 이게 한국이 발행을 해갖고 작년부터 시작된 국제 행사의 날인데도 불구하고 올해 언론 쪽에서 보니까 이거 푸른 하늘의 날, 그러니까 청정 공비나 이런 석탄 화력에 대한 기사가 한 줄도 나오지 않고 그냥 넘어가고 있더라고요. 그냥 행사 알림 정도로만 언론의 활동이 끝나는 행위를 좀 봤었는데, 좀 이런 거에 대해서도 저희가 좀 자극을 주면서 언론과 적극적으로 협동할 수 있는 방안을 찾으면 좋을 듯합니다. 네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Anyone want to follow up on that intervention? Please go ahead.
I think I can go next. So thank you for the wonderful presentations and for the really warm introductions. I guess for me, just adding in my personal comments about just this whole importance and impact of youth participation. So from the uprising of Tunisian youth to Tiananmen Square and now Greta Thunberg's exploding influence to tackle climate change. There are moments in history when the gap between our political and economic system and what they are actually doing is too large to be ignored. And I believe we are at that crucial point where people are rising up to stand against that change and all over the world. So we are here today to cement, as we have over and over again, the crucial role of youth. But still we sense skepticism, we sense doubt of our ability and of the possibility to affect change. So we have, however, as Min have mentioned, we have seen a prime example over the past year of what the carbon neutral community have been doing. And why this is a prime example is that it was really only just last year, President Moon Jae-in launched the pan-governmental 2050 Carbon Neutrality Committee to meet the national goal of lowering our emissions. However, this year, the committee announced 3 policy roadmaps to achieve that goal, which was condemned rightfully and duly for its failure to come up with scenarios that meets this demand. And as stated, what I again want to mention time and again is, first of all, from how the government has dealt with the coronavirus crisis, we have seen how the public and private spaces have been flooded, have been really taken immediately into action to tackling the virus, and in just a matter of few months. So we do have every reason to demand this level of alarm and alert is actually possible, and to let everyone know. Additionally, more than ever, global action is crucial to necessary achieving the reduction goals, as we are also realistically aware that it's necessary to find alternatives that would compensate the insufficient reduction goals. And again, as stated in the youth scenario for 2040, beyond simply purchasing emission rights to overseas reduction projects, commitments that guarantee implementation, such as the transfer of domestic techniques, electric vehicle batteries, offshore wind substructures, etc., and expansions of contributions to vulnerable developing countries we acknowledge that these are essential as well. So I guess the point is, just from my personal experience, I kind of hope that this COP26 would be able to create that synergy that not just youth to politicians or high-level ministerials have together, but also youth with each other to ignite change and spark the necessary action that we need to take in order to drive the change. So yeah, that's, I guess, what I have about overall. Thank you.
Anyone else from the youth participants?
네, 제가 말씀드려도 될까요? 이제 앞서 다 좋은 얘기들을 해주셔가지고 꼭 말씀드리고 싶었던 부분 중에 하나는 이제 아까 앞서 프리캅 얘기를 해주셨는데 이번 프리캅에서 당사국 간의 협의를 위해서 만들어졌고 여기서 최종 서류를 만드는 과정이 이루어질 거라는 얘기를 꼭 해주셨는데 사실 저번 COP25를 보게 되면은 이제 아티클 8의 이제 로스 앤 데미지 파트나 파이낸스 부분에서 충분히 더 논의됐어야 하지만 시간상 논의가 되지 못했거나 아니면 좀 급하게 마무리가 된 부분들이 있다고 생각을 합니다. 이런 부분들을 워킹 페이퍼를 작성하면서 매우 중요한 부분이라고 생각을 했었는데 이제 사실 그 이후로 전 세계적으로 코로나가 이제 터지게 되면서 그런 부분에는 지속적인 논의가 잘 이루어지지 않은 점이 매우 아쉬운 부분이라고 생각을 하고 그런 부분에 대해서 유스컵이나 프리컵 같은 청년들도 그거에 대한 어떤 촉구를 진행을 하고 또 꼭 프리컵에서 그런 부분들이 잘 해결이 돼서 이번 COP26에서는 기존에 이제 좀 해결되지 못하고 정체되어 있던 기후변화 문제들이 잘 논의가 되기를 되게 바라는 입장이고 그 논의가 되는 과정에 있어서 청년들의 목소리가 좀 적극적으로 반영될 수 있는 창구가 마련됐으면 좋겠다는 게 제 생각입니다. 감사합니다.
Great, thank you so much. So there were quite a few interesting points that came out of these three interventions. So I would like to hold on to a few of the reflections. I think interestingly, it's mentioned that the youth in Korea, or at least those represented here today, would like to see higher ambitions from the Korean government. So maybe we can ask Mr. Nigel to give some recommendations to go a bit more in depth on the recommendations for how effective youth movements are built and sustained and eventually have results.
I guess the first point, I think you mentioned a sense of frustration about not being taken seriously. You know, I think that sense of frustration is almost universal amongst young people, but also amongst people of faith, amongst mayors, amongst businesses. It's a very complicated process, and it's very hard to figure out a way to feel some agency to. So if anyone promises you that the frustration will go away, they're probably lying. So the frustration is, I think you have to channel the frustration, because I think it's unlikely to go away. So, and I do think that two things that I've heard about today. First of all, this paper, which I think is fantastic, right? Because it's saying, what is your opinion? What do you want to see in the language of the negotiations? And second of all, the 2040 scenario is fantastic, because it's saying, it's not just saying you're not ambitious enough. It's saying, and I love the way you say it, you're asking a question, but by putting forward something much bolder and saying, in a way, I think you're challenging and saying, why can't we do this? So first of all, I think these are very good campaigning tactics. I think, and so I don't know the details, but I think the sort of things that can be really helpful. And I think you could build on the working paper. And I'll share a link. In COP21 in Paris, I was leading the coalition that we called We Mean Business, and we were trying to find a way to take a positive voice of business to influence a positive outcome. So in what we did something very similar to this, except we actually said, here is the text that businesses want to see in Article 3.2. And I think I might still be able to find an online copy of the document. So I think getting specific, because when you're in Glasgow, you can then go to a country delegation and you say, this is what young people want. Not a general statement like, we want you to solve loss and damage, or we want things to be fairer, because a negotiator can't do anything with that. Because they're actually literally negotiating the words. So if you say, these are the words that young people want, then you have a chance of influencing that's much stronger than if you're too general. I think on the 2040 scenario, first of all, I think it's really important. I mean, my job is to push ambition. So I'm really excited so I'm coming here and I'm hearing people talking about a 35% NDC. So what I'm saying is, if you want to be taken seriously internationally, you need a 50% NDC. Now I know there's politics, right? And it's not you who will decide. It's not me who will decide. It's, in a way, it's all the machinery of the country, which of course is biased towards older people. But I think the sort of thing you can do is, and you may be already doing this, is start getting specific, like on the coal phase out. What is your plan for coal phase out? But one thing I would say is, as you're doing that, listen for the arguments against your, so for example, the two that I've heard are, one, jobs. So you're going to kill people's jobs. So maybe go to the communities where those jobs are, talk to people there, try and understand. Then you get a better sense of the challenge of being a politician, right? It's not just a spreadsheet. It's humans who may be complaining. And second of all, I hear it's the cost of electricity. So become real experts in the cost of electricity, so that, because sometimes people use easy arguments that are not backed up by facts. And so you have to become an expert on the facts, so that somebody says and uses an easy argument, make sure you know enough facts to say, actually, that's not true. You say this about electricity, but here's a study which proves that, you know, renewables plus storage can be cost competitive in Korea, or here's the proof that you're subsidizing fossil fuel power and the real cost is actually higher. So I think those are the two things I'd say, is try and get underneath the politics, and make sure you're armed with specific facts. And then you can really push for closing those 8 power plants, or ending combustion engines in 2030, those kind of things. So there's a couple of thoughts.
Those were great points. So be specific, learn the facts, meet the challenge. I really liked what you were saying. This is that moment in time where the facts really are important to meet the challenges we are facing. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to what he said, want to comment a little bit on how that matches the process that you're already undertaking, perhaps, or anyone? Yes, please go ahead.
네, 안녕하세요. 제가 이번에 이거 워킹 페이퍼를 작성하면서 느꼈던 점이, 이런 것들을 모두 다 청년들이 보내는 과정이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각이 들었어요. 근데 이제 이런 서한들을 보내는 과정 속에서 저희가 피드백을 들을 수 없는 점이 되게 많거든요. 그러다 보니까 이런 정부나 아니면은 정책 입안자들이 저희에게 피드백을 줄 수 있는 기회들이 많이 생겼으면 좋겠다라고 생각이 들고요. 그리고 청년 참여가 굉장히 중요하다고 많이들 말하고 있지만, 이번 COP26 자체에서 코로나 때문에 한국 청년 단체들이 참여하기 굉장히 지금 어려운 실정에 있어요. 그러다 보니까 우리들의 참여가 중요하다고 말은 하는데, 실제로 행동에서의 그 괴리감이 저는 되게 힘들다고 생각이 들거든요. 활동을 하는 데 있어서 계속. 그래서 이런 저희도 어떻게 보면은 동기부여가 계속 있어야 이런 활동을 꾸준히 할 수가 있을 거고, 그리고 이런 활동을 하는 데 있어서 서로 간의 소통이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각이 드는데, 이런 소통 과정들에 대해서 앞으로 어떻게 해주실 수 있을지 이야기를 듣고 싶습니다.
Yeah. Do you want to take that?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Sorry, I need you please to express better exactly what you want, to make it more concrete, the question. Sorry.
I want to ask about this. I want to ask that how can we get your feedbacks when we send like this working paper or other submissions about our position?
Apologies for not turning on my microphone. So for the sake of the translator, I will repeat what I just said. I believe that your question links very well with some of the other points that were raised about how to be heard and how to have influence. And I believe that's exactly what Italy is now doing, which is to really put some science into how to facilitate youth voices effectively into the international climate negotiation process. So maybe you could, Mr. Roberto, could speak a little bit more about what that entails and how that perhaps could help Korean youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, the idea to involve young people and to listen to what they are saying is at the base of the event EU for Climate Driving Ambition and of the pre-COP. It's it's a concept of losing this kind of, if you want, teachers or professor idea that we tell you what things have to be done, what things should be done. It's the idea of together with the experience of experts and young people's ideas and desires and expectations to create something that is more ambitious, of course. If I can connect back to, I think you were saying, you were talking about the difficulties in connecting with the press and to have newspapers talking about these topics. It is true, yes, of course, it is true. It is difficult in Korea as it is difficult in other countries. But in my opinion, and that has been done in Italy also, we realized that the newspapers, the magazines, of course, not entirely, but in a good part, are giving us what we want to hear. So we can influence newspapers, we can influence journalists, we can influence magazines and express what we want to hear, trying to raise our voices, trying to send articles, trying to participate to debates as this one. It's a way to show that young people are interested in the topic and young people are collaborating with institutions. They are collaborating with politicians, which is going to create more interest in journalists and magazines and newspapers to talk about the topics. And that is going to increase the audience of these topics. I've seen in my experience here in Korea, something that has happened also in Italy in some years ago, that when you want to be heard by politicians, you have the means to be heard. There are petitions to the Blue Houses that, if the topic is important, can raise hundreds of thousands of signatures in a few days, and newspapers are talking about it. There are public events, there are debates, there are ways through which people can really raise the attention of politicians, local level maybe at the beginning, but then at the national level, and then journalists that are always following these thematics, these swift changes of opinions and ideas. So that happened in Italy in the last years. Young people were very vocal, were strongly advocating these topics. They were contesting also, sometimes violently, politicians, because they didn't feel that they have the attention they needed. I'm not saying that you need to do it violently, but I'm saying that you can do it loudly. And I'm sure that journalists and politicians will follow, because they see that the topic is more and more interesting for the people, and they understand that this is what they need to give to people.
Just to add, there's no easy way, right? It's messy, it's complicated, it's the whole world, it's the whole system that we've built, which is causing the problem. So we're trying to change the system. So you have to get organized, and then you have to be forensic. You have to decide, what are you trying to, if you try and change everything, then you change nothing. So, and you're getting organized, right? But then you have to decide, are we trying to influence the negotiations? In COP, are we trying to influence the governments? So this is influencing the negotiations. The scenario is influencing the government. Then maybe you want to influence KEPCO, you go to a specific campaign on one coal plant in one community. If you want more press, if you want to engage with negotiators, you have to speak the language of negotiators. This is what you're doing. If you want press coverage, don't send this to the press, right? It's straight in the bin. It's boring for the press. If you want press coverage, say no Korean kids are ever going to buy a Samsung phone again until they commit to net zero 2040 in line with our scenario. Okay, then you got a story which is drawing attention. I'm making it up, but nothing against that. I have a Samsung, right? But just think about what the press like conflict. So say what Apple is ahead of Samsung. We're all going to Korean kids are all going to buy Apple. That's probably a story. Or we're all going to buy Nissan cars, not Hyundai, because Nissan have said they'll be 100% electric in the early 2030s. So you have to think about. It's like all communications, who's the audience, what's the message, who's the messenger, and so you have to be forensic. But I think you're showing that you have all the skills to do that. It's just that you can't do everything at once. You have to decide: negotiators, government, business, and who's the audience.
Great. I think do we have a question from the audience? Okay. Yes, let's take a question from Nadi.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Can
Floor is
everyone
yours.
hear me? Good. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to participate this kind of constructive discussion. The way that I get here today was one of he's my boss. He said he encouraged me to participate this meeting, and then his name is, I'm not sure if you're aware of the People's Party, 국민의 당 in South Korea. The representative of People's Party asked me to participate this meeting since I am deputy spokesperson of the party. So I've heard a lot of frustrations of this discussion from the speakers, that they're having a lot of problem how to get into the politics to actually find their solution or stuff. So I just what I really wanted to say is that if you needed to have more influential voice, you can actually try to find a messenger who can spread your words properly, like the politician who might be interested in this kind of situation or the problems, the social problems. Just like right now, just like today, all of these words, what you guys have been talked to everyone is going to Mr. On is going to be reported from me what you guys have been trying to say it here. So he is going to make a move according to what you guys are saying. So I just wanted to say that all this youth climate activists, climate all this speakers of this environment problem is going to be sent to the politics. So I just want you to know that there is a politician who is trying to listen to the youth of the environmental problem. So if you need any way to talk to, you can try to find a politician you might who might be interested in listening to you. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nari. I'll hand it back to the room. So I think we've had quite a few recommendations for how to build a movement, how to get the politicians on board, how to raise media attention. And I think this is very much what Mr. Min Kim was speaking about, how to tap into that motivation and sustain an engagement of youth. I don't know if anybody would like to speak to what are you doing to build that movement and that momentum? Do I see your finger on the button there? Or we can see whether Gyuri Lee, are you still on the line? Because I think as the representative of Korea in Milan, does this resonate with how you are now engaging at the international arena? Does that give you a platform where you believe that you also can reach a Korean audience?
Hi, I'm still online, but could you please repeat the question because the connection was a bit unstable here?
Yes, I was just wondering, as the representative in Milan from Korea, do you sense that this gives you a platform to also engage with a Korean audience as you are involved in this International Youth Cup?
In some sense, I do feel like that because after I was selected as a representative of Korea, I have posted on LinkedIn and like other social media, and then some climate activists were like reaching out, like also domestic and also like international like climate activists. So I think in that sense, I also had some like opportunity to have connection with Korean climate activists, like youth activists. But I have not really had an opportunity to be somewhere like introducing what I will be doing in the Youth for Climate yet, as we had this COVID-19 issue and like there were limited numbers of events inside of Korea. So yeah, I think it would have been great if I had more opportunities to introduce this event, and that like this event exists and some people can also join via online. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I'll take a moment to take this off if that's okay. My name is Mark Buttigieg. I'm the Economic Diplomacy Counsellor at the British Embassy. Many of you will remember me from hosting, although I had a beard then, in case you don't recognize me. I cut it off recently because it was annoying me with this mask. But I hosted that event to listen to you all then, some months ago. And so a little bit of hope here, a bit of a positive message amongst this, because I feel the mood's dropped a touch. And I want to pick this up. You know, you all told me a lot of really useful information. You gave me a lot of interesting views. You told me where you were looking at this problem from. Me and my colleagues, we found that incredibly interesting. We reported that information to London. We reported that information to Mr. Nigel Topping. We encouraged Mr. Nigel Topping to come out to South Korea to use some of those arguments to influence the Korean system. And he has been doing so since he's here, and he will hopefully continue to do so over the next couple of days. So there is a direct example of the influence you guys have already had in South Korea, which I think is a very positive thing. And more than that, just today we have been talking to a lot of people, and we have been using lots of those arguments again just today, and we will continue to do so. And indeed, we, the British Embassy, and many of our colleagues in other like-minded embassies have used a lot of these arguments in our engagements with the Korean system quite regularly. And I certainly feel, having been here for a few years, trying my best to help influence the noise and help to encourage the Korean population to engage with COP26. I mean, that is a big part of what I do here, and I've been doing that for 3 years. And you know, I feel the frustration that is very difficult to do. I have tried, and we have, I think, had some success actually in moving things along, getting that noise a little bit louder. So in terms of tips that we've picked up and things that have worked well for us that you might want to consider, I think creativity in the way you approach the communications is really important. Just trying to find some new angle. So thanks to my colleagues, Heina and Nicole over there, for example, they forced me to go on TV and to try and charge an electric vehicle on NBC. And I enjoyed the experience. But what I tried to do through that entertainment program was to get the sort of messages on climate change out to a wider audience. We've worked with Blackpink, as you'll know, an attempt to try and engage the youth in a slightly different way, because let's be honest, my ambassador's fantastic and regularly speaks through social media and writes in newspapers, but not everybody engages with that medium in the same way that they would do with a Blackpink sort of press release or bit of social media. So, you know, that creativity, trying to find fresh new angles that will engage, try wherever possible. And another top tip here is be relentless. Keep trying, keep doing that in different ways, and be consistent, in particular, trying to use some of that expertise that Nigel talked about, those specific arguments to counter some of the really difficult but consistent narratives that you will constantly hear, such as electricity prices, such as the very difficult wind conditions that you face in South Korea, for example. These messages keep coming, but they keep coming consistently, which means you can keep consistently replying to them. And it does work. So a little bit of positive sort of messaging from me there to say it is working, keep it up. We will keep listening. We will keep feeding that back as much as we can. And, you know, through the youth movement and through the youth COP, that will feed into COP. And, you know, it's working well so far.
Maybe add to that, because I think this question of as a campaigner, how do you keep motivation? It's a really important one, right? So yes, be relentless. And I would also add, you know, some objectives are so big, it's very hard. Like, so influencing the outcome of a negotiation between 195 sovereign countries is a very big objective. And it's also very hard to draw a line between whatever you do. And even you think of Greta Thunberg, right? Amazing. But what can you actually show that her amazing work has changed, right? Because the world's so complex. So that can be very frustrating. You have a sense that you're pouring your life into change, but you never get any feedback. So sometimes it's also worth being very specific about your campaign objectives. So one thing we find very helpful to a lot of just this campaign, the Race to Zero, we have now, I mean, what we're really doing is trying to give a campaign to thousands of people and say, look, one way that you can help is to get one more company, one more bank, one more city to join the Race to Zero. So, you know, or one more company to join RE100. So I know this is a couple of years ago before COVID, actually my last job, visited Japan a couple of times, and there are organizations there working really hard to get 10 Japanese companies, 20 Japanese companies, 30 Japanese companies to join this campaign RE100. And then those companies start lobbying the government to change the energy plan. So you know, the activists who've tried, even if you've only helped one company join, because through some connections, through somebody who you know, whose mother or father is on the board, then you can see that you're part of something that is having influence. So it's also worth thinking about what are some of the maybe small wins that you can, because feeling your agency, feeling your power really matters. If you never feel your power, then you probably in 3 or 4 years just give up, because it's very hard to keep pushing if you don't get feedback, as you say. And so sometimes feedback is direct feedback, like I will give you some comments on this text. Sometimes the feedback is we pushed to get this company to join that, make that commitment, and they did it. And then we can go and we can celebrate, and then we can go to the next company feeling our power. So I would just recommend that you think about some of the sort of small campaign wins that give you that sense of your own power, because you'll be surprised how that starts to, and that's a muscle that you can build, right? Of finding your power and then exercising it.
Yeah, if I may add to what Nigel was saying, we agree completely with this approach of small steps. We tried during this year and a half that we were getting ready for the pre-COP26 to involve a lot, for instance, universities and small municipalities. Because, you know, Seoul, it's a big capital, it's much more complicated to do anything. And our influence can be very small, sometimes irrelevant, while in smaller municipalities, maybe they will not change the world, but it's a small step, and it's where we see concrete results. We have worked very well, for instance, with the municipality of Chuncheon in Gangwon-do. We had a lot of events with them. We realized that they are interested, that they wanted to change, they wanted to do improvements. So it was really, we saw results in what we did with them. And we saw results also collaborating with universities. We found professors that were willing to listen to us, that were willing to share our experiences, what we presented them with their students. And then we were in touch with their students that were willing to understand better some dynamics and some experience and some problems also that we had in Italy in doing this process. So small steps, but probably in the long run useful.
Thank you for your presentations and discussions. I'm going to give you my discussion in Korean. Yeah. 네. 이제 청년들이 활동을 지속하는 게 중요한 것 같다는 말씀에 동의를 합니다. 계속해서 시도하고 노력하고 새로운 방법을 찾고 그거는 당연히 중요하다고 생각하는데 문제는 청년들은 보통 이런 일을 할 때 학업을 하면서 하거나 아니면 다른 일을 하면서 하거나 아니면 이 일을 시작하기 직전에 하거나 그러니까 커리어가 변경되기도 해요. 이런 청년들의 목소리를 내면서 이제 삶의 변화가 많이 생기는 게 청년들의 특징이에요. 그래서 이런 청년들의 목소리를 지속할 수 있는 힘이 사실 부족하다고 많이 느끼거든요. 그리고 사실 먹고 사는 문제도 사실 중요하고요. 청년들도. 그러다 보니까 청년이라고 해서 모두가 다 기후변화에 관심을 갖지 않기도 하고요. 그렇기 때문에 기후변화에 관심을 갖고 있는 청년들마저 소수일 수밖에 없는 게 사실 현실인 것 같아요. 그렇다면 어떻게 우리가 이 힘을 계속 지속할 수 있을까? 그게 항상 고민입니다. 제가 생각하기로는 이제 관련된 직업이 많아지는 게 제일 좋을 것 같은데 뭐 이런 활동가도 직업이 되는 경우도 있고 아니면 뭐 대학이나 뭐 이제 뭐 학위를 하거나 이러면서도 이제 직업이 생길 수도 있는데 뭔가 아직까지는 뾰족한 방법을 못 찾은 것 같아요. 이런 문제에 대해서는 어떻게 생각하시는지 궁금합니다.
Probably quite a few people who could say something. I see Nigel, you would like to say something to that?
One of the sort of several advisory roles I have is advising the Grantham Institute, which is 2 universities in London, the London School of Economics and Imperial College. They have 2 climate change institutes. And about 4 years ago in Imperial College, they launched a new master's course on finance and climate change. And they said they wanted to get to 40 students over a 3-year period to build slowly. They had more than 40 students in the first year. They now have over 100 students, and they're all getting good jobs. So I think, again, if that's the thing that you're most concerned about, then make that your campaign to get your university or a university to start providing a degree course. But again, you have to get organized. You can't, if you just complain and say, we want more opportunities, then a busy university principal or a busy lecturer can't really do anything with that. It's just a complaint. If you say, look at this story, in London, Imperial College launched this course, they've got 100 students within 2 years, then you're starting to speak the language of the university administrator who knows that to launch a new course is a lot of work. If they don't fill it with students, then it'll be a waste of effort. But if they start to see that this is a good idea that's working elsewhere, and they immediately, you tell them that they've got 100 master's students within 2 years, then they're interested. So again, I think you have to find a way of channeling your frustration into quite a concrete, and you might fail, right? Because most of the time when we try things, we fail. So again, you have to, but again, if you're in a university and you've got an organizing principle of people who you're studying with, you can decide together something you want to try and change. It might be to get the university to commit to 100% renewable energy, or get the university to commit to a new degree course. So, I mean, only you can figure out where your influence is and what the thing that you can really be passionate about trying for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years to change. But I think there's always something, and the world is changing. You know, everybody's waking up, and my belief is that, you know, 99% of humans are good people who want to be part of the solution, but you have to find a way to make it easier for people to change, because most people are too busy, as you say, your colleagues, you know, just making a livelihood, whether you're a young person or an old person. Most people are concentrating on just getting by in life. So if you want to, you have to find a way to speak the language which makes them say, oh, that, not here's another student telling me what I should do, but oh, here's a student who's got an idea for me that can help me do my job better. Then you've got the beginning of an exciting change, I think.
We have data in Italy in the last 10 years that have shown us that green energies and all what is connected to green energies, including organic cultivation, recycling, and so on, is creating a lot of job opportunities for the young people. So more than what the fossil usual energy sources are doing. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I think that universities understand that and are willing, if there is a demand, a request, to help prepare people for these careers, for these jobs, for these opportunities. Just think about the reuse of waste, circular economy, and all what is happening in the, at least in some European countries. I have no experience about Korea, but for what concerns my country, the organic productions, food production, there are a lot of young people that are investing in that. Our productions in these fields are huge because a lot of young people are going with new ideas, new products, new investments in areas that were maybe abandoned in the past because they were not profitable for the ones that were the traditional products of the country. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities in these fields.
I totally agree. So yes, I think we are onto something exciting now in terms of this also being an opportunity and not necessarily in conflict with the focus on study and the focus on livelihoods and work. I don't know if you want to speak to that, or yeah. Did I see you want to push the button to respond, or? If not, no pressure, because I know someone else around this table who I know is quite passionate about this. So Mr. Frank from GGGI, I don't know if you would like to speak to climate change as an opportunity, the disruptions and the role of youth. I know you are very passionate also about the young generation of staff in GGGI and how youth and young professionals are also impacting the work in GGGI. So please, Frank.
Yes, I've been listening with interest, not wanting to occupy time, but indeed, we've worked in GGGI on a number of continents, for that matter, on green entrepreneurs, helping young people start innovative businesses that actually contribute to the solutions. And we have, on the other hand, shown that if countries just implement their NDCs, they'll create, I would summarize it as massive employment opportunities. You know, of course, the people who currently work in a coal mine, they will talk about losing jobs. But at the same time, in renewable energy, in nature-based solutions, in forest management. We're creating many more jobs, right? So indeed, we will create employment opportunities. Usually when we talk about the NDCs, we only talk about the reduction in emissions. We don't talk about how many jobs it creates, but we published actually last Friday a report analyzing for some 29 GGGI member countries how many jobs will be created if they just implemented the NDC targets that they committed to in renewable energy and forestry, right? That is, I think, very exciting. But yes, those are the big picture things. At the sort of, what can I do? There are many green entrepreneurial opportunities that young people can engage in, I believe. And there are a lot of, here in Korea, there are all kinds of incubators and accelerators and actually opportunities that the government has to support young people that want to start new businesses in these innovative areas as well. And actually the Korean Green New Deal provides direct support for that kind of action as well. And another good news for you as Koreans to be proud of is that the Prime Minister's Committee on Development Cooperation in July approved the Korea Green New Deal ODA strategy, which promises to increase the green part of Korea's ODA to at least the average of OECD DAC countries to 28%. What that also means, frankly, is that for a lot of young Koreans who want to work internationally, there will be a lot of resources and opportunities to engage internationally in this kind of climate action. Just one point. Thanks.
Great. Now, show of hands, how many of you are making climate change your career? Sort of, yes. Do you want to share on that?
Yes, I'm currently in the field of civil engineering, but as you all know, civil engineering, especially in the transportation and industry sectors, they do quite emit a lot of carbon. So I'm hoping to engage in research or in a field that would uphold ESG values or just really be aware of this area. Yeah.
Great points. So now I think sort of we have about 10 minutes left of the conversation. So now if we go back to the starting point, I think we've come to the recognition that it's about building movements and it's about getting people engaged. And it is about getting your voices heard. And we have also touched on the fact that it also will change your workplaces and where you will work. So it's the movement building, and it's also impacting the work opportunities that you have also in Korea. So I would like to perhaps again just go around the table a little bit and get your reflections now on either the key takeaways from the conversation today. What are the key messages that you think you want to bring back to your organizations where you work or your workplaces to either strengthen the movement or transform your livelihoods into something that eventually benefit climate action? Should we maybe start here?
저한테 처음 이렇게 발언해 주시니까 조금 당황스럽긴 한데요. 얘기를 들으면서 다시 돌아간 것 같아요. 제가 이렇게 발제를 준비하면서 나는 여기서 어떤 거를 얻어갈 수 있을까에 대한 고민들이 다시 이제 이야기를 하면서 많이 들었던 것 같아요. 근데 결국은 이러한 사람들과 계속해서 만날 수 있는 거, 그리고 아까도 그 날개리 말씀해 주셨지만 나와 다른 생각을 가진 사람들과 만나는 거, 그게 결국에는 이 기후위기라는 게 여기에 있어서는 누구도 피해로부터 피해갈 수 없잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 그 사람들과 계속 만날 수 있는 거, 그러면서 한편으로는 이렇게 비슷한 생각을 가지고 있는 사람들과 지속적으로 만날 수 있는 것, 그게 진짜 중요한 것 같아요. 어떻게 보면 아까 그 동기부여와 어떤 자기 효능감이 계속해서 이제 선순환되어야 된다고 말씀을 드렸는데요. 그것이 저는 사람으로부터 온다고 생각합니다. 그래서 이제 사소한 것부터 시작하라는 아까 그 로베르토 이제 부대사님께서 말씀해 주셨던 것이 어떻게 보면은 사람들과의 만남 자체가 사소한 시작이라고 생각도 듭니다. 그러니까 쉽게 예를 들면은 내가 혼자 이제 손수건 쓰고 이렇게 텀블러 쓴다고 해서 혼자 하면은 힘들잖아요. 네. 아무도 이제 감시하는 사람이 없고 주변에서 같이 이렇게 이야기할 수 있는 사람이 없으면은 동기가 계속 자연스럽게 떨어지는 것 같아요. 그래서 그 동기를 서로 채워줄 수 있고 그런 것들을 서로 어떻게 보면 감시를 하게 되는 거죠. 너 잘하고 있는지, 얘 잘하고 있는지, 계속 관심을 갖고 있는지들을 볼 수 있어야 되는데, 그래서 동료를 만날 수 있는 공간들이 굉장히 많이 필요하다는 생각이 들어요. 아까 말씀 주신 대학도 그런 공간 중에 하나가 될 수 있다고 생각을 하고요. 다만 그런 것들을 하기 위해서는 아까 유정님께서 말씀해 주셨지만 특히 정말 한국적인 맥락에서는 굉장히 현재의 삶을 유지하기가 쉽지 않은 상황이기도 해요. 취업부터 해서 이제 결혼, 육아, 심지어 어떤 연구 결과는 기후이기 때문에 내가 그 아이를 낳는 것을 다시 한번 고려해 보겠다. 안 낳을 수도 있겠다라는 연구 결과가 있기도 한데 그런 것들이 결국에는 이런 동료들이 많아지기 위해서는 그 사람들이 가지고 있는 삶을 어떻게 개선할지로 다시 돌아가는 것 같아요. 그렇게 되면 오늘 주제인 그 정치라는 게 결국은 그 기후위기로부터 나아지기 위해서는 결국에 그것들을 할 수 있는 사람들이 어떻게 하면 그 사람들의 삶이 나아질 수 있을까라는 고민을 다시 하게 되는 것 같습니다. 그래서 좀 정리를 하면은 나와 다른 생각을 가진 사람들과 만날 수 있는 장을 만드는 게 굉장히 중요하고 그것들을 위해서는 사실 저희가 가지고 있는 캐파시티나 역량에는 분명히 한계가 있어요. 가지고 있는 것들이 뭐 사실 아무것도 없기 때문에 자발적으로 한 것도 있지만 그것들이 앞으로 필요하기 위해서는 또 그런 서포트가 필요하거든요. 뭐 예를 들면 전문가들과 만날 수 있는 자리를 계속해서 만들어준다. 이런 자리처럼. 그리고 그런 사람들이 만나서 이야기할 수 있는 공간들이 필요할 때 그런 거를 좀 재정적으로 어떻게 서포트를 할 수 있는지부터 시작을 해서요. 그리고 그런 동료들과 계속 만날 수 있게끔 어떤 이런 자리들이 또 한편으로는 또 필요할 수 있겠다. 다른 생각을 가지고 있는 사람들과도 계속 만나야 되지만 나와 같은 생각을 가질 수 있는 사람들과 만나면서 그 사람들과 같이 이런 삶에 대한 고민을 나누고 그러다 보면 자연스럽게 나 스스로가 가지고 있는 이제 마음과 어떤 태도에 대해서도 계속 점검할 수 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 어떻게 보면은 그 지속 가능성을 위해서는 이 같이 활동하는 사람들의 삶도 지속 가능해야 된다라는 생각으로 마지막 마무리하겠습니다. 네.
제가 저의 교수님께 이제 기후 변화와 관련된 교양 강의를 열어달라고 말을 할 생각이었거든요. 근데 오늘 말씀을 듣고 정말 그래야겠다고 생각을 했고요. 그리고 민킴께서 이제 시나리오 우리 24리 시나리오 얘기를 해주셨는데 그 작업에 이제 저도 참여를 했었습니다. 그 작업을 하면서 스스로 굉장히 많이 배웠고 왜 탈석탄이 필요한지 이런 것들을 배웠고 전체적인 거를 볼 수가 있었어요. 그래서 뭔가 이 시나리오를 우리가 정부에 제출하는 거에서 끝나는 게 아니라 그런 다른 사람들과 함께 프로그램 하거나 뭐 교육 프로그램을 만들거나 이럴 때 좀 활용해 보면 좋겠다는 아이디어가 좀 생겼습니다. 그래서 이런 아이디어들이 지금 이 자리에 참석했기 때문에 떠올랐거든요. 그래서 계속해서 이런 자리가 있으면 많이 와서 많이 배우고 싶습니다. 정말 감사드립니다.
네, 저도 이제 한글로 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 사실 오늘 앞서서 많은 얘기들을 들으면서 되게 많은 영감을 받았는데 그 중에서도 이제 가장 기억에 남는 말은 이 청년으로서 이 활동을 기후 위기에 대한 대응 활동을 계속하기 위해서 어떤 중간중간 작은 성취가 필요하다라는 점이 정말 많이 와닿았다고 생각을 합니다. 뭐 그리 오랫동안 활동을 한 건 아니지만 몇 년간 활동을 하면서 중간중간 그런 성취들이 없어서 매우 힘들었던 순간들이 있었던 것 같아요. 그래서 이제 그런 활동들에 있는 그런 성취들을 확인할 수 있는 이런 자리들 혹은 그런 뭐 앞서 말했던 프리캅이라든지 유스캅이라든지 아니면은 그 와이프라든지 그런 활동들이 되게 많이 늘어나서 청년들 이런 이제 활동하고 있는 청년들이 이제 비슷한 생각을 가진 사람들과 만나고 또 전문가들과 만나고 그래서 자신들이 여태까지 해온 것들을 확인할 수 있는 기회가 늘어났으면 좋겠고 이제 그렇게 기회를 늘어나는 게 또 새로운 활동가들을 더 늘릴 수 있는 방안이 되리라고 생각합니다. 앞서 너무 좋은 얘기를 많이 해주셨다시피 이제 그 사람들이 이제 쉽게 말하면 정말 먹고 사는 그 생활도 중요하지만 이 활동을 지속할 수 있는 원동력이야말로 내가 걸어온 족적을 명확하게 확인해 줄 수 있는 그런 방안들이 그런 자리들이 행사들이 더 많이 늘어났으면 좋겠다고 생각을 했습니다. 오늘 이런 자리에서 주셔서 정말 감사합니다.
네, 저도 오늘 발제 너무 재미나게 들었고, 이렇게 청년 활동가분들 한 자리에서 모여서 만나니까 너무 푸른하시기에 좋았던 것 같아요. 저는 이제 얘기 들으면서 하나 아까 언론의 관심, 언론의 주목을 우리가 어떻게 끄느냐에 대해서 얘기를 했었는데, 아마 빅웨이브도 저희가 알기로는 뉴스레터 하시는 걸로 알고 계시고, 저희도 작년 10월부터 지금 1년 동안 뉴스레터를 만들고 있어요. 뉴스레터는 이제 특히 한국에서는 20대, 30대들이 많이 보는 뉴스 채널 중에 하나인데, 여기서 이제 그 BBC나 아니면 포브스와 같은 이제 해외 언론에서 기후변화 뉴스를 다루는 거를 그대로 한국에서 번역을 해서 저희가 배포하는 일을 하고 있거든요. 그래서 이런 걸 통해서 저희 세대의 그런 관심사도 올리고 지금 구독자가 한 500명 정도 돼갖고 되게 1년 동안 성취감을 느끼면서 일을 하고 있는 상태입니다. 그리고 이제 이러한 것과 더불어서 아까 그린잡에 대해서 좀 얘기가 나왔던 것 같은데 제가 같은 경우에는 사실 저희가 진짜 기후변화에 좀 더 효과를 주고 싶다. 여기에서 우리가 뭐 유의미한 결과를 만들고 싶다고 하면 그린잡에 들어가는 것도 물론 정말 너무 좋겠지만 그것보다 좀 더 확실한 방법은 오히려 이 녹색이 아닌 분야에 들어가는 게 좀 더 효과가 있지 않나 싶어요. 그래서 저는 환경부에서 일하는 것보다 산업통상자원부에서 환경에 대한 의식이 있는 사람이 더 큰 걸 만들 수 있다고 생각하거든요. 네, 그래서 저희 사회 곳곳에서 작은 씨앗이 다 되셨으면 모두 좋겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
That's great. If we can keep it short, just in interest of time, but please continue. Thank you.
네, 오늘 발제 정말 잘 들었고요. 제가 두 가지 말씀드리고 싶은 게 있는데 짧게 하도록 하겠습니다. 일단 첫 번째로는 이 청년들의 참여를 독려하기 위해서 이런 저는 인식 개선, raising awareness가 저는 가장 우선되어야 한다 생각합니다. 오늘도 뉴스에서 이제 교육부와 환경부에서 생태 전환 교육이 선언되었다고 해요. 그래서 그런 것처럼 교육적인 부분뿐만 아니라 그리고 아까 말씀하셨던 것처럼 뭐 예능 같은 그런 다양한 문화적인 측면에서 청년들과 청년뿐만이 아니라 더 많은 제너레이션한테 더 접근할 수 있는 방법이 모색되었으면 좋겠고요. 그렇게 해서 이제 공동의 목소리로 그런 사회적 분위기가 형성되었으면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 제가 두 번째로 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 뭐 기후 위기, 뭐 탈석탄, NDC 이런 것들은 기본적으로 모두 우리가 자연을 아끼고 자연을 사랑하는 마음에서부터 우러나온다고 생각합니다. 그래서 저는 이런 뭐 아까 말씀하셨던 nature-based solution이나 아니면 생물 다양성 이슈가 이 기후 위기 문제와 같이 논의되어야 한다고 생각합니다. 그렇게 함으로써 좀 더 자연 중심적인 자연을 생각하는 솔루션이 나왔으면 좋겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
네. 저는 이제 워킹 페이퍼 활용 방안에 대해서 계속 함께 고민을 하고 있는데요, 친구들과. 이제 저희가 이걸 아직 어제 이게 작성이 완료가 된 거여가지고 초안만 작성을 완료한 상태고 아직 어떻게 더 활용할지 방안에 대해서는 좀 더 논의를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 아까 나에게리 말씀해 주신 방안들을 모두 다 고려를 하면서 이걸 어떻게 더 활용할 수 있을지에 대해서 명확히 생각해 볼 수 있는 자리가 되었던 것 같습니다. 자리 만들어 주셔서 감사합니다.
네, 일단 여기 계신 귀빈들의 그 고견 들으면서 많은 생각을 했던 것 같고요. 근데 사실 저는 뭐 환경에 대해서 뭐 전문적인 지식을 갖고 있는 사람이 아니라 사실 지극히 평범한 대학생이에요. 근데 그렇기에 정말 지극히 평범한 청년의 입장에서 한마디 드리자면은 사실 왜 사람들이 환경이나 기후에 대해서 관심이 저조할까라고 해보면은 삶에 있어서 밀접하게 연관되지 않는다라고 생각하기 때문이라고 생각해요. 그러니까 사실 먹고 사는 문제가 제일 바쁘기 때문에 환경 그게 뭐 나한테 무슨 상관이 있겠냐 이런 생각을 대부분이 하는 것 같아요. 근데 사실 저를 예시로 들자면은 제가 이렇게 환경에 관심을 갖게 되고 이 간담회까지 오게 된 이유는 되게 간단했어요. 사실 대기업에서 ESG 위원회라는 것들을 만들고 그로 인해서 회계법이나 로펌 같은 데서도 ESG 관련해서 친환경적인 측면에서 얘기를 많이 하고 있네. 근데 그 과정에서 제가 그럼 이건 나랑 관련이 있고 관심을 가져야겠다라고 생각을 했기 때문에 지속적으로 활동을 할 수 있게 된 것 같아요. 그렇기 때문에 사실 뭐 단기간적으로 큰 변화를 만들어낼 수는 없겠지만 지금까지 했던 것처럼 계속 꾸준하고 어떻게 보면 진부할 수 있지만 그러한 활동들을 계속적으로 해나가는 것이 뭐 정책적으로나 활동적으로나 중요하다고 생각합니다. 그래서 그런 것들을 좀 정리할 수 있는 좋은 시간이었던 것 같아요. 그래서 감사합니다.
Hi. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just apologize for the minutes we go over time. I would like to ask Mr. Nigel and Roberto and maybe also Frank to have the last word. Thank you very much.
So in contrast to my rather grim comment earlier, I'd like to end it on a happier note and share my own take on opportunities like what you mentioned. And I address this to everyone here in the room really. So while I relate to the point that there is a tendency to feel powerless, especially when you feel like you're alone, what I found personally effective was to target the people who are open to listening to you and keeping the conversation going to the point that people have no choice but to be part of it. And that is why, honestly, at this COP, I do not expect high-level agents or policymakers to listen to us, realistically speaking. But again, going back to the small wins that you have mentioned, I do believe there is huge potential at this COP, especially in hearing the concrete strategies, initiatives, programs by others, especially by youth, that have worked for them to affect change. And just to, I guess that is how I would like to find it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nigel, do you want to?
Well, just a few thoughts. I think first thing to say is you're already making a difference. Even though it's not, you don't always see it. And it is hard. So, you know, you're doing all the right things, getting organized and then choosing your intervention. I think that this working paper and the scenario are great examples of very smart ways of making a difference. And as I said, winning is the most motivating thing. So one thing I offer to you is anything, and if you want to help recruit one more Korean city, one more Korean company, one more Korean bank to the race to zero, I'd love to hear that story. I think your point about dialogue with people who are different is a really important one. It takes some more courage to speak to someone who disagrees with you, but maybe by listening and by explaining, that's the thing that opens up creative solutions. It's certainly something we do a lot. Like when we started getting criticism about the race to zero and net zero commitments, so we invited some of the critics to a public debate around how do we get net zero right. And of course, it turns out that their concerns are the same as our concerns, that some people can greenwash. And so we talk about the solutions to the common problem instead of criticizing each other. I love the point that it all starts with love of nature, I think also with love of each other. And also the recognition that not all youth are stepping up and doing what you're doing. So I want to thank you for your individual leadership and encourage you to keep going. You never know when one more conversation is the one that convinces someone to say, okay, now I'm going to change. And it's impossible to know that, so you just have to keep on going. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you, because this dialogue that we had in the last 2 hours is inspirational also to us to understand better the difficulties that young people are facing. What I would like to underline to you, and it happened to me when I was a student, and I was blessed with the teachers and professors that were very keen on explaining me and talking about green energies and then the need of protecting the environment. We don't need to do big things. We can start from small things. Check with your families. Go home and see how your mother, your dad, your relatives, your brothers and sisters, tell them to switch off the light when they don't need it. Tell them to switch off the water when they don't need it, not to waste the little things. That is already going to do something. You can even check it at the end of the month, how much you spare in the electricity or water or whatever, or gas. It's a sum of small little steps that can help. And then you share, you spread a different knowledge to other people around you. So give the example, basically, even with the small things. That happened to me when I was a student at school. My teachers were explaining me these things, and I was going home and switching off the lights when it was not useful, switching off the computer when I was not using it, switching off the water when I was not brushing my teeth, and so on. Taking a shower instead of using the bathtub. It's a lot of water that is not wasted, let's say. So step by step, I think everybody, even if it's not interested in that, can do a contribution to it.
Thank you. Summing up a little bit, I think we've talked about frustration this afternoon, but I have to tell you, for somebody who's been in this topic for many years and in Korea for about 5 now, I think actually the pace of change in Korea is very impressive and very rapid. You know, when President Moon was elected, I think everybody thought he would primarily focus on peace in the peninsula, right? That he wasn't really interested in environment or climate change. Yet we now have the Green New Deal, carbon neutrality goal, net zero goal, carbon neutrality commission, this big change to ODA. I'm quite impressed by that, right? Well, yes, right now the sticky point, the difficult point is higher ambition for the NDCs. That's kind of the fighting point in Korea. So I have to say, choosing to go with your working paper on influencing the negotiations in COP26 is about the most difficult goal you can choose, I think. It's a moonshot. It's, I think, very impressive that you're thinking at that level. But yes, maybe smaller steps might be easier. You've been hearing about some smaller steps, convincing one company, one city. In between, I think you have an interesting opportunity that Narili, I think, was pointing to you. We have presidential elections here next March, and I think there are 6 front runners. And I've heard a number of people talk about how few of them have a real program on climate change, right? So there you have, I think, an opportunity to influence not just Mr. Ahn, but also the other candidates and say, what are they saying about climate change? What do you want to hear them say about climate change? That is, in a way, taking that work that you have with the Carbon Neutrality Commission right into politics, into something that will be super influential in this country and might directly link to what this country will do next. Now, I do think here today, we see that there are quite a few young people who are very active, very inspired by climate change. But I think it is true when I go to more meetings, not that many people in Korea are inspired by climate change. What we haven't said this afternoon is you can link climate change to issues that are more of immediate concern to people. And here in Korea, that's why we picked, you know, blue skies and net zero. More people here in Seoul are worried about fine dust, are worried about their health, and that is intricately linked with climate change. So that was my last point, that I think by tying the blue skies, the fine dust, the clean air issue into climate change, you can reach a lot more Koreans that are directly influenced by their own health, their children's health. You know, and in the Blue Sky Day we had last week, we had a great presentation by a Chinese professor who showed how intricately linked the health issues are of clean air and climate change and how many lives can be changed. And she showed convincingly that if China just meets its clean air goals, they're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by much more than their NDC commitments currently are. Wow, very interesting. And I think that might also be somewhat inspiring for you here in Korea as well, to think about how you can tie climate change into issues that people do care about, and to tie it into important events in this country, like the presidential elections, that you may be able to influence a bit more easily than the outcome of COP26 in Glasgow. Anyway, I thought this was a great discussion, and very happy that we had an opportunity to host this together with the UK Embassy and the Italian Embassy and with all of you and your groups, and that you found it worthwhile to come, and that many of you indeed said that this was inspiring and gave you ideas and hopefully energy to keep going in your own campaigns. So thank you all.
And I also wish to thank you all for your participation and your active contribution, the great conversation. You are not alone. You are already achieving things, and your voices were heard today by a group of climate professionals, I may say, who may be of a different generation, although they have said today that they are not. We are all working together on this. It's an intergenerational effort, and I think that's how we will be successful together. So thank you all. Also, thank you, Gyuri Lee, who is on the line, wishing you the best of luck in Milan. You have your representative there, so hopefully that also will have some very fruitful outcomes for all of you. I wish you best of luck, and I look forward to invite you back here maybe in a year's time to hear how things have gone. Thank you very much, and good evening.